generations to come.
And welcome to another edition of the TDN Writers Room. My name is Bill Finley. I'm a correspondent for the Thoroughbred Daily News, also the co-host of the Down the Stretch show with the legendary Dave Johnson on SiriusXM Radio.
I'm Randy Moss with NBC Sports. Sidekick Lucy fast asleep in the background.
Zoe Cabin with First Racing and XB TV. I am still at Keeneland. This is the longest sale ever. If you look over my shoulder, there's no dog. But right now we're Tuesday and they are on hip number 2,491 that just got sold. So we're a little way over halfway through. Can you believe that? It is the biggest horse sale in the world. It is insane.
Actually, we're going to come back to that subject a little later because Zoe is our resident expert on the Keeneland sale, and she's going to tell you everything that's going on. Also want to remind you that this week and every week, we're proud to be brought to you by Keeneland, and we always recognize the great racing and the great sales that they have. So the story on the racetrack over the weekend, Charlie Appleby was only 2 for 3. What's going on? He's in a slump, guys. But I mean, this is so remarkable what this trainer has done with his shippers coming in to North America. He ran 3 horses over the weekend, the Jockey Club Oaks at Belmont and Aqueduct. He won with Eternal Hope. He was third in the Talma with Dazzling Star. But I thought the big story is what he did in the Woodbine Mile with Master of the Seas. A lot of stats to throw out there, but how about this? In his career, he is 8 for 11 at Woodbine. All 8 wins have come in Grade 1 stakes. And he just has this knack for knowing exactly which horses to bring and which horses to put them in. And the thing that's remarkable about Master of the Seas, he was plan B, Randy. This was supposed to be Modern Games coming back to this race, winning, and then going on to the Breeders' Cup Mile. Modern Games got hurt and was retired in August. So he brings in one off the bench, and it's Master of Seas. He wins, and he goes on now to the Breeders' Cup. He is, since 2021, the last 3 years, Appleby is 21 for 50 in the United States and Canada combined. That's 42% winners. Just remarkable what he's done and continues to do.
It's absolutely amazing. The entire Godolphin Appleby stable really this year is on Plan B. They're in a bit of flux because they began this year with not only Modern Games, who a lot of people really didn't realize was a 3-year-old last year when he won the Woodbine Mile and the Breeders' Cup Mile. So he was beginning his 4-year-old season. They had a horse called Adiyar, who they were bringing back as a 5-year-old, who had won the Epsom Derby at 3. They had Hurricane Lane, who had won the Irish Derby at 3. And they were bringing him back this year as a 5-year-old. He had only been beaten 3/4 of a length in the Arc in 2021. They had a horse called Native Trail, who was a 3-year-old, was narrowly beaten in the English 2000 Guineas, won the Irish 2000 Guineas, right? They had a horse in Australia named Animo. That's not Appleby, but it's a Godolphin. 9 Group 1 wins, $7 million in earnings. All of those horses, including Modern Games, had to be retired during the calendar 2023 season. So it has been a year of complete upheaval for the Appleby/Godolphin stable. But they sure landed on their feet on Saturday at Woodbine. Master of the Seas, even though the speed figure guys don't have his performance quite as powerful as Modern Games was when he won the Woodbine Mile a year ago, they looked an awful lot alike. His race Saturday and Modern Games race a year earlier. And right now, the way I look at it, I think that Master of the Seas currently would have to be a relatively solid favorite in the early figuring for the Breeders' Cup Mile again this year at Santa Anita.
Randy, even over Casa Creed?
I think so. Oh, definitely. Yeah. I mean, Casa Creed is the best of the American milers. I don't think that the entire American mile turf division stacks up to what the Europeans would typically bring over. And we saw an example of that with Master of the Seas on Saturday.
And one thing that you know exactly what you're going to get when you come to Santa Anita. And Charlie Appleby has been there numerous times. His first Breeders' Cup winner was at Santa Anita. He knows you got to bring a horse that can handle a tighter course. He knows you're going to get firm ground at Santa Anita most of the time, unless there's an absolute deluge, which, God, I hope not, but I don't think that's going to happen. So he knows what kind of horses will fit on these American tracks. I tuned into the Godolphin homepage, and the headline there for Master of the Seas was Master of the Seas grasps Grade 1 victory with Woodbine Mile demolition. They actually used the word demolition in print, and that is exactly what he did. In 2023, now these are the worldwide Godolphin stats, 433 wins worldwide. That's 737 runners, 19%. They've had 111 stakes wins, 111 worldwide, and 16 grade ones, just specifically from the Godolphin stable. I mean, those are some huge numbers they're throwing out. Charlie Appleby is a massive part of that. It's the juggernaut. It's not stopping. It's just getting stronger. Don't stand in front of it. You'll get run over.
Randy, as you mentioned, this is not necessarily, at least from the beginning of the year, the A team. And looking at what's happened, and there's a small sample size, but there's been a few other races run in the U.S. this year where the Europeans showed their strength. And the one I always go back to is Bolshoi Ballet in the Sword Dancer, grade 1 at Saratoga. He was coming off a 6th place finish at 125 to 1 in the King George and Queen Elizabeth Stakes. And he comes into Saratoga and wins one of our big grade 1 races. We know the European turf horses are better than the North American horses. I mean, that's their main racing. That's where all their stars run. But it seems to me that the gap between the two is never been bigger. I'm not going to bet on any non-European horses, be they Appleby or Aidan O'Brien. I'm not going to try to beat these guys in the Breeders' Cup. I think they're going to wipe us out.
I mean, the gap certainly hasn't shrunk, and it may be widening. And you would think that the Americans would be at least partially catching up, because turf racing has become more front and center in America than it was 25 years ago. Right, more turf races are run, better horses, you think, but then the Breeders' Cup rolls around, and that's when you really get to see the best against the best, obviously. And lo and behold, Europeans have now won 12 of the last 15 runnings of the Breeders' Cup Turf, 4 of the last 5 runnings of the Breeders' Cup Mile, and 5 of the last 7 runnings of the Filly and Mare Turf. So the proof is in the stats. The Americans right now at the very top levels just don't compete with the Europeans as effectively on turf as you think they might. And the rule of thumb has always been, I think, that if you look at European form and you see a Group 3 winner in Europe, that they can win a Grade 2 in America, or a Group 2 winner in Europe is a Grade 1 caliber horse in America. Sometimes it may even be more than that, Zoe.
Yeah, I mean, you can just look at some of the horses that Phil D'Amato is winning with. He's bringing horses over from Dundalk that were just winning maiden races in Dundalk. There isn't even like a Class 1 track over there, and they're winning graded stakes. So it just goes to show you the quality that they're running against. You just need a horse with a little bit of a turn of foot. Bring it over here. They need to, especially in California, they need to like the top of the ground. You can't bring a soft ground horse over to California. And that may lessen the gap between the Euros and the American horses this year alone. Having it at Santa Anita is that it's going to be for firm ground horses. So some European horses may not come out because they don't like to feel the top of the ground. That could be the equalizer at Santa Anita. But yeah, you cannot argue against the stats. The Euros versus the Americans. They have to catch up soon. Because if you walk down Chad Brown's shed row, almost at least a third of his horses are either a GB bred or an Irish bred. They're all imports. So that there has to be a catch up at some point sooner rather than later.
Well, we shall find out. I think at least it's not going to happen this year. One of the big stories of the week, and also, don't you love horses like this? Bango. He's not going out there winning grade 1s every weekend, but he won for the 11th time at Churchill Downs, and they are calling it the most documented career wins, tying a horse by the name of Reddy's Rocket who was around about 2012 in a starter allowance race. Bango won the Louisville Thoroughbred Society Stakes. He's a 6-year-old. I don't want to rain on the parade too much because I don't want to take something away from this horse because it's really cool, but that's not a record, 11. Because back in 1940, there were horses that ran 75 times during their careers and probably made 50 starts at Churchill Downs. Somewhere along the line, somebody's won more than 11 races at Churchill Downs, but we just don't have that information. But having said that, I don't want to be the Grinch who stole Bango's Christmas Day.
Well, you're trying. You're definitely trying.
I take it all back.
Jeez, Bill, my gosh.
I just wanted to bring that up.
Give him some credit. He's been running in stakes. It's not like he's
He's won 9 stakes races. He's really cool.
Yeah, it's not like he's winning 5 claimers.
Sorry,
he's
guys.
a stakes
Never mind.
horse. Be nice.
Wow.
My goodness. He's a stakes horse who's won 11 at Churchill Downs. That's not hard. That's hard to do. You got to give him some credit. Come on.
Oh, I give him a lot of credit. So,
and credit also, a lot of credit goes to Greg Foley and his sons as well for the job that they've done with this horse. I mean, Foley has proven time and time again he's one of the more underrated trainers on the Kentucky circuit. He doesn't get these, $1 million yearlings and things like that, but the horses that he gets, he maximizes their potential. We saw it with, Philly sprinters. We see it with Bango. 14 career wins for Bango, 11 at Churchill. In case you're keeping track at home, he won 1 race at Turfway on the synthetic surface very early in his career. Might have even been his maiden win. And then he won 2 at Ellis Park, including most recently the Kelly's Landing Stakes. But the Kelly's Landing was a race that was moved from Churchill to Arlington. So while he doesn't get credit for winning at Churchill, it was a Churchill race that he won that happened to be run at Ellis Park.
Okay, I take it all back. He's a wonderful horse. And in all seriousness, no, it's really cool. And we don't have enough horses like this out there that these kind of blue-collar horses that you can really root for. And they just run. Every time out, he just runs his race. So congratulations to Bango and the whole team over there for winning the Louisville Thoroughbred Society Stakes.
Do want to remind you, and how could you not realize, the TDN Writers Room is brought to you by Keeneland. The first week of the Keeneland September sale has concluded. Books 1 and 2 saw the sale of 37-figure yearlings. 30, that is a big, big number. Turnover through the first 7 days stands at just $350 million. We'll talk more about the Keeneland September sale, which continues through this coming Saturday. It's not over yet. That's September the 23rd, a little bit later in the show. But first, entries are now being taken for the Keeneland November breeding stock sale, held this year, November the 8th through the 16th. We'll be right back after this message from Keeneland.
At Keeneland, a horse will always be measured in hands. Hands that see, that sense, that speak. Hands that hold our sport to a higher standard. Not for our sake, but for theirs. For the love of the horse, for generations to come.
The Retired Racehorse Project's Thoroughbred Makeover is presented by the Thoroughbred Charities of America. It takes place at the Kentucky Horse Park in Lexington, October the 11th through the 14th. The Thoroughbred Makeover will welcome 404 horses, including both recently retired racehorses and, for the very first time, guys, former broodmares. I looked up a couple of the former broodmare division, which I think is a fabulous brand new category because there are too many former broodmares just tossed to the wayside. This one's entered in the dressage section. Her name is Summer Chant. She's a 2012 model by Summer Bird. She's had a couple of foals already. Her last race was in 2015. Todd Pletcher had her. She won 2 of 7. Rebecca Jones from South Carolina is her listed trainer, and she is a Wertheimer homebred. She was actually sold at the Keeneland November sale, I think last year, for the upset price of $1,000. So good to see her get a soft landing. One more to mention, guys. In the eventing category, there's a horse called Ghost at Midnight. He is number 227 by Curlin out of Midnight Lucky. A few years ago, he was a $1.2 million yearling right here at Keeneland September, and he will go forward in the eventing segment. A really worthwhile thing they have going on there. You can look up more entries at rrp.org/entries. It's pretty cool to see all these horses being entered, don't you think, guys?
Yeah, that's just phenomenal. And the industry deserves a lot of credit for doing such a good job with this. All right. So Zoe, as I introduced you, you are our Keeneland September expert here. Randy and I don't know about Randy, but honestly, I don't pay that much attention to the sales. But it looks to me like the story kind of never changes. The high end of the market is fantastic, and the middle and lower end of the market, What were the big? Am I right about that?
Yeah, I mean, they've made almost up to 350 million thus far. They're on par for last year. The median's dropped, I think, by 3.5%. I will say one thing. I went around and looked at Book 5 horses. I have never seen as many people here for Book 5 that I have seen the last couple of days. I think people got shut out in Book 4. And they're staying for Book 5. Nobody's leaving. I'm like, what, guys? What are you still doing here? Just go home right now. Rapoli's guys are still on the grounds looking at horses. I mean, it's just been a terrific sale all around. The money for the top end horses is still going to be there. I mean, you had a $700,000 Good Magic colt sell yesterday to Tom Ryan in Book 4. That doesn't usually happen. Some of the first year sires have been terrific. Vacoma. They're very, very nice, volatile, extremely nice. You got Game Winner, a son of Candy Ride. He had one sell for $275,000. So the first year sires are in demand through Book 4, 5, and they will be through 6. And, City of Light. Hey guys, last year you couldn't give away a City of Light. And now they've come around full circle. So it's really been a terrific sale, not only for the buyers, but also for the sellers. Randy, where are you? I mean, why don't you come and buy a horse with us? Come on, Randy. We could use.
It's really odd, and I've been in horse racing for a long time, but I'm always doing television shows typically around the Keeneland September sale or the Keeneland April, whatever. I have never been to a Keeneland sale session.
Really?
Not one. Yeah.
Well, come on. What are you waiting for? Come on, we'll buy you a horse.
Well, I won't have my hand in the air. I can guarantee you that.
Randy's Rabbit Hole.
Zoe, Christmas is on. Oh, my God, what a perfect name. Now we have to do it. Christmas is on its way. Maybe we'll surprise Randy with a little present underneath his Christmas tree. So this week, HISA came out with its report looking into the situation at Churchill Downs, where 12 horses died. Unfortunately, around Kentucky Derby time, and then they decided to move racing to Ellis Park. And one of the things that they came up with was that this is verbatim. The data revealed the injured horses were in more races per year in their career. So they're actually saying that is there a link to horses running more often and potential breakdowns? Now, the two of you should know how I respond to that. My head exploded when I saw this. I mean, thank you, HISA, for doing the good work and everything like that. But two things. First of all, you can't possibly draw any conclusions like that looking into 12 horses, when unfortunately the amount of horses that pass away each year is much more than that. And I'll take another. So by that line of thinking, let's take a look at Saratoga. And I hate to bring up bad subject, but I still want to mention this. Maple Leaf Mel passed away, was euthanized in her 6 lifetime starts, had 4 this year. The gaps in between her races were 56 days, 50 days, and 28 days. New York Thunder, the other one who tragically passed away, and made 5 lifetime starts with the gaps in between 33 days, 84 days, 89, and 29. So if I look at the Churchill situation like HISA did and apply it to these 2 horses, I'm coming to the conclusion that they didn't run enough, that there was too much time in between the race. And I don't want to make any light of this because it's an awful, tragic situation. But I just don't believe for a minute that, the horse is racing little more often than the average, if even that's the case, has anything to do with this.
Really? It doesn't surprise me. It really doesn't. I mean, I know there are obviously outliers, and I think the letter mentioned that. There are obviously some horses that are more sturdy than others, but all you have to do is look at how horses are being trained nowadays and how often they're being campaigned compared to how often they were campaigned even 25, 30 years ago. And you can tell, and even from talking to trainers, you can tell, that they believe that today's horses are less durable / more fragile than the horses of yesteryear. I remember and this is 30 years ago, I was in the newspaper business, and I don't remember if it was in the aftermath of the Prairie Bayou breakdown and the Belmont Stakes, but I had been talking to trainers 30 years ago who told me that they thought horses were less durable. And I thought, who can I talk to for a newspaper column? Who would be the guy to call? I called Woody Stevens. And I said, Woody, do you think today's horses are less durable than before? And he went on for 30 minutes talking about how horses 30 years ago were more fragile today than they were back then. So, I mean, look, if trainers, the day money the trainers make, that they bill owners for each day that they train a horse, goes for the top stables, goes almost 100% to feeding horses, stable upkeep, paying salaries, things like that. Trainers make their money from purses, from winning races. And if trainers thought that they could run horses more often and get the same results, they would. They would run horses more often and make more money for their owners. Their owners would make more money. But they don't feel like that's the case. And I think it's not brain surgery. It's not rocket science when you look at the top stallions in America right now. Go back the last 10 years, right? The stallion, the end of the year stallion standings have been dominated by 3 stallions: Tappet, Candy Ride, and Into Mischief. They ran 6 times, 6 times, 6 times. You go back and look at the stallions of yesteryear in the 50s, 60s. Round Table ran 66 times. Bold Ruler, 33. Prince Quillo, 33. Halo, 31. Bull Lee, 27. That's not a coincidence. And most of the stallions that we see right now dominating American racing were retired not because of flight line reasons, but because they had injuries. They were hurt. And so it makes sense that these horses are now going to be passing on questionable durability to the horses that we see running right now. I think that's something that I don't know what can be done, but breeders are looking, understandably, they're looking for speed. They're looking for ability. The fastest way in the world to go bankrupt would be to open a stallion barn and to have a bunch of stallions and advertise that these stallions are the most durable stallions in America. These stallions will run for years and years. They won't be that fast, but boy, they'll have all kinds of races. Nobody would breed to them,
So one second, Randy, even though you're totally wrong, I want to ask you this question. The debate about the Triple Crown, when First Racing came out and said the main reason why they want to change the spacing is because they think it's safer for horses 4 weeks versus 2 weeks. You obviously must agree with that then.
100%. 100%. The Preakness is one of the most traditional great races in American racing, right? There's only one reason why trainers run in the Kentucky Derby nowadays, they didn't before, skip the Preakness and wait for the Belmont, rather than run in a race like the Preakness that, by the way, is more important to making a stallion than winning the Belmont Stakes. And that reason is that trainers think it's not in the best interest of the horses to bring them back in 2 weeks. And it's not just performance best interest. It's in the overall physical best interest of their horses. I promise you, in the back of their mind, they believe that they are taking a gamble if they run their horses back in 2 weeks that they might not necessarily need to make. So, yes, I think it's absolutely should be considered as this horse safety issue when you look at the spacing of the Triple Crown.
Zoe, did you drink the same Kool-Aid Randy did?
I wrote it all down, actually. That was very interesting. Round table, how many times did he run?
66.
66 times. And you're right. I mean, trainers do not make a dime off of day rate. They just don't. In order to make their money, their 10% of 60%, which is what they get, you have to win. And if you run your horse back in 2 weeks, the chances are he's going to bounce. He's not going to be at his optimum peak performance level, and you're not going to win. So you've wasted a start. Trainers don't like to run their horses unless they can win. And stats, and I think a trainer told me a long time ago, the worst thing to happen was the DRF putting in the percentage, the win percentage in the form. And that means trainers that like to run their horses into shape, give them a couple of starts, were basically being crossed off the list because they won at 10% when they're perfectly good trainers, but the percentage is not high enough. So not only are they worried about winning, they're worried about the percentage. And people look at this. People want to have their horses with a high percentage trainer, which means each run, be it every month or every 6 weeks, has to count and they have to win. And the thinking nowadays is less is more. And it's been tried and proven over the course of the last few years.
But the question Bill has, and the point I made, Zoe, what's your opinion on this? I mean, yes, trainers believe that the performance of their horses will be better with more time in between races. But do you think they believe that in running horses more frequently, they're gambling with, they're tempting fate, that something untoward might happen to the horse if he runs more frequently, or she?
No, I'm not buying into that. I'm buying into the fact that most trainers that I have to deal with and that I know are not trying to squeeze an extra race out of their horse, or not going to because they're worried the horse is going to break down. I'm not buying into that. That horse won't be in the barn. I'm buying into the fact they want to have their horse ready to run and run its best race, which is why they need the spacing and the time. I don't know too many people that are saying, oh, I can't run back in 2 weeks because I think my horse is going to break down. I don't know anyone that thinks that.
No, but in my opinion, and this is from talking to many trainers, they don't always necessarily admit it publicly because so many of them train for breeders. And if you say that horses are more fragile than they used to be, in effect, you're indicting the breeding industry for breeding horses that are not as sound as they used to be. Now, there's some other things involved. You know, what do they do to horses before sales, right? The surgical intervention sometimes with horses before they send them to sale. There are a lot of other things that go into that. But I promise you, trainers, the vast majority that I've talked to, believe that today's racehorses are more fragile and more susceptible to injury than the horses were of yesteryear. And I think that plays into it. I really do.
Sure. I mean, and they are. I mean, they're definitely more fragile, for sure.
Randy, it was one thing to keep in mind. You don't even need to comment on this, but you're talking about. You mentioned Woody Stevens. I think you might have mentioned Chad Brown, Flightline. Those type of horses that fall into that category are what, 0.5% of all the horses that run. If you own a $5,000 claimer, you have to run those horses as much as possible because otherwise you're going to get crushed. I mean, you need to make. You want to make 15, 16 starts a year because if Flightline can race 3 times a year because he's worth $1 zillion as a stallion. But if you're some little guy who owns a bowling alley outside of parks and, has a 5 claimer, you can't afford not to run these horses as often. Every time that $7,500 claiming race comes up in the book, you really have to, or else you're going to go broke.
That's one of the real dilemmas and real quandaries right now in the racehorse business when you see all these injuries. Exactly. The TDN Writers Room, meanwhile, is brought to you by the Pennsylvania Horse Breeders Association. We'll be talking in a minute about the races on Saturday at Parks Racing in Philadelphia. One of those races is a turf sprint called the Turf Monster. in which Christophe Clement is running a filly, Roses for Deborah, who has a sensational record. She's a perfect 8 for 8 in turf and synthetic races, and she'll be running against the boys for the first time in that turf monster, which has always been a pretty good prep for the Breeders' Cup Turf Sprint. Reason I'm bringing this up, Roses for Deborah is a Pennsylvania bred. So could we be looking at a scenario where for the second year in a row, a Pennsylvania bred filly could go on and win the Breeders' Cup Turf Sprint? In other Pennsylvania bred news, Dollarization won the Light the Fuse Stakes at Pimlico. A half hour before that, Witty won the Ben Cat Stakes and at Aqueduct on Thursday. And Allowance went to the West Point Thoroughbred owned. Pennsylvania bred, don't look back at all. And don't forget, when we talk about the races Saturday at Parks Racing, the big races, right? The Pennsylvania Derby, the Cotillion. There are also those two PA bred, PA sired Stallion Series races at Parks on Saturday for 2-year-olds, each with a purse of $150,000. For more about breeding in Pennsylvania, email pabreeder@gmail.com.
The PA Horse Breeders Association presents the Pennsylvania Stallion Series. 6 races for PA sired, PA bred 2-year-olds at Parks. 2 $100,000 contests at 5.5 furlongs. On August 21st, PA Day at the races. September 23rd, PA Derby Day has 2 races at 6.5 furlongs, both with a $150,000 purse. And in December, 2 races going long, each worth $200,000. For more, go to pabred.com.
And now for this week's Fastest Horse of the Week, brought to you by the Fast Sires at Windstar Farm. Question, who is the leading sire of 2-year-olds in 2023? That would be Zoe.
Constitution.
You've got it. You've got it. Fast Sires for 1,000. Zoe comes up with the answer. Constitution. 14 winners who have earned over $1.3 million, 2-year-olds so far this year. He's also the number 1 Kentucky sire in this category. You look at the number of 2-year-old starters compared to 2-year-old winners. He's at 47%. And over this past week at Keeneland, Zoe knows this, he's had yearlings sell for $1.3 million, $900,000, $850,000, and more. It's important that Constitution is the leading stallion son of Tappet, and even more important in this case, that he stands stud at Windstar Farm. Now, the fastest horse of the week, no surprise, we've talked about him already. Master of the Seas, the winner of the Woodbine Mile with a Beyer speed figure of 104. Now, 1 year ago Saturday, Modern Games won the Woodbine Mile with a Beyer speed figure of 112. But as we said, Master of the Seas looked dominant in that win in the Woodbine Mile, and he is this week's fastest horse of the week. The TDN Writers Room also brought to you by the Green Group, a tax accounting and advisory firm specializing in the thoroughbred industry. They're the sponsor, of course, of the Green Group Guest of the Week. For more information, you can go to www.greenco.com.
Welcome in now, the Green Group Guest of the Week, and it's a special one this week, and I think it'll tug at your heartstrings. It's Wayne Jost, and he is a co-owner of the horse Carson's Run, who won the Summer Stakes, Grade 1 Summer Stakes last Saturday at Woodbine. So let me briefly first tell the story, and then we can have Wade talk more about it. As you see in the background, over his left shoulder is his son, Carson. Carson has Wolf-Hirschorn Syndrome. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. And the reason why people in racing might be familiar with that is because that is also the syndrome or affliction that Cody Dorman has. That Cody Dorman, of course, is the young man the horse Cody's Wish is named after. Wade went to the United States Military Academy with Terry Finley, the head of West Point Thoroughbreds. They stayed friends over the years. They talked a lot about Carson and his condition. And Terry said, I'm going to name a horse after Carson someday. It all came together this year. They named Carson's Run after Carson. And lo and behold, they didn't name just any horse Carson's Run. They named a real good horse, a Grade 1 winner who'll be headed now to the Breeders' Cup Juvenile. And we'll welcome in now Wayne Jost. And Wade, generally, what has this been like for your family? I can't imagine how good it must feel to have some good news and a positive story come out of all this.
It's been emotional, as I already my voice breaks right now. We just want to do something for Carson. He's never walked, and this is an opportunity to give him some focus, give him some limelight. We have 4 children, and the other 3 were really good athletes, or are really good athletes. They're all grown now, but he was always going and with us to their events to as they competed in the various sports, and was always in the background. Yet he's always been one of our focuses, and so Terry and I have been talking for over a decade about this, the possibility of doing something in his honor. And the timing was just right with what was going on this year with a variety of things. Carson just turned 31. He wasn't supposed to be with us and supposed to have passed early in life. But mainly because I'll give all the love to his mother, who has constantly taken care of him as I completed my military career, as I've gone into business. And we've just been very fortunate that he is who he is, living in his own little world. As you can see right now, he's happy, relatively healthy, and exceeded all our expectations. But it was one of those things where, like, okay, let's give him some limelight. And it was more of just living vicariously through something, an animal that can, actually run. He's been confined to a wheelchair since day one. And it's just a phenomenal thing that Terry and West Point Thoroughbreds has done for us. And the fact that Carson's run has had the successes he has had to date is just an added smile on our face. It just makes us happy that we can live vicariously through it this way. And Carson gets to experience something, at least visually, that he can't do physically. And so that's where we're at with it right now.
Yeah, Wade, sort of like Cody's wish, it seems like there's something else at play here, I mean, to have 2 situations like this and 2 really, really good horses is just flabbergasting. One of the real coincidences here that I was reading is that you and Terry had made the decision about Carson's run even before the Cody's wish story came to pass. Can you talk about that a little bit, and then what it was like knowing this was in the pipeline to then watch Cody Dorman and Cody's wish at the Breeders' Cup and some of those other races?
Yes, it like I said, Terry and I have been talking about this for some years, but we were both at West Point back in the end of February, beginning of March, for a funeral of one of our classmates who passed. And that's when Terry said, you know what, we're not getting any younger. We need to make this happen. So I said, all right, we're all in, let's do it. And lo and behold, a couple of weeks later, he called me up and said, I think I have the right horse. And I said, let's go for it. He made sure that we decided to call it Carson's Run. So that was in late March. And Carson and I were home by ourselves the day of the Kentucky Derby. And at that point, I didn't know about Cody and Cody's wish. But as we were sitting there, just Carson and I in front of the TV, watching, one of the build up to the final race, I think it was the 9th race of the Kentucky Derby. And they started doing the special about Cody. And as soon as they showed him, there's no doubt in my mind before anything was even said that he's got 4P minus as well. And they went forward and talked about it. And it was emotional for me to watch that on top of everything else. And then, later that day, Terry and I talked, and I was like, I'm glad we're doing this, but I didn't want to take any of the special circumstance away from Cody and his family and how well Cody's wish is done. And I just was, I was unsure that we were doing the right thing at that point. And Terry said, no, you can't take anything away from Cody and you can't take anything away from Carson. So we're doing this. And then evidently I didn't know that Kelly, Cody's father, and Terry had crossed paths at some point. I don't know how good of friends they are, but they reached out to Terry and said, we'd like to get together with Carson and his family. So we've been talking via text. We've been congratulating each other. I look forward to them. I think their next race is on the 30th of this month. It sounds like we may both horses may be at the Breeders Cup. If so, we'd love to get together with them. We'll talk about it after we get through some more races here. It's good that it's out on the West Coast for us. Given that we live in Washington State, it may still be tough. Carson has a lot of issues, one of which is a very low immune system. So with everything going on right now, with all the viruses going on in the world, it may be tough to get him down there, but we'll see. We're hopeful, and we'll continue to talk to Cody and his family, and that would be that would be the epitome of all this, is to see those two together and then watch the horses run in the same weekend.
Wade, two beautiful stories. And the one thing we love about horse racing is the stories and the people that it encompasses. So I'm really looking forward to it. Hopefully I'll get to meet you at Breeders' Cup along with the Dorman family. But I want to take you back. You're a guy who firmly wears his heart on his sleeve. How was that very first win for you? Watching a horse named for your son, you just wanted to honor him with a name, to be a four-legged athlete. How was that feeling for you, watching him cross the finish line? Not once, but twice, but three times. Like, that's got to be pretty amazing.
Yeah, now you're going to see my heart on my sleeve again. Just seeing his name in print and seeing the horse trot out and the manner in which they did, I don't know what I was expecting. As my wife and Carson were sitting here waiting for it to start, and they got in the gate, and I'll say I was kind of numb at first, because you're like, okay, this has already exceeded all our expectations. And then the manner of which Carson's run the race, and then to see it repeated, for the other two, especially this last one, where Carson's always in the back of the pack. Carson's always the one who's just there with everybody else. And to see him slingshot around the corner and come back and be in the winner's circle, be in second place, be just competing, continues to be overwhelming for me personally. But it was kind of alluded to earlier. I do believe animals understand in some way, shape, or form. You've seen some of the pictures with Carson and his dogs. They weren't bred to be helping dogs. They're just family pets. But all four labs we've had have been special to him. They know he's special. They take the time to, like the one we have now, Barley. She won't really cuddle with anybody but Carson, and she'll get right up on the couch and she'll cuddle with him. They know there's something special. And I think it's the same with horses. You can say, in our case, Carson's run and Carson have not met. I know in Cody's case, Cody and Cody's wish, that was really instigated by Cody's wish. But I think there's still something there about, they know they have a special purpose in life and they're doing it for somebody. And so it doesn't surprise me when it's all said and done that both these horses are doing what they're doing on the track. I am very anxious to see, wheel Carson up next to Carson's run and to see what the reaction of the horse is. My gut says it's going to be a very affectionate, different from all the other different people that he's ever been close to Carson. And I can't explain it. No proof of it. I've just seen what our animals have done to Carson and how they've reacted to him and how they've cared for him. And I think it's the same in horses as in many other animals.
Yeah, I'm sure you're right about that, Wade. I think it's going to be wonderful when Carson meets his namesake. When I wrote the story originally about this for the Thoroughbred Daily News, I asked, does Carson, is he at all aware of what's going on? Is he aware that there's this horse out there named after him?
This is where his mother and I kind of differ. She's around him day in and day out. She has been since day one. And I saw early on where he doesn't like crowds, which makes another thing about going to the track race a little bit difficult, but we'll figure something out. Even when he was really young, 6 months old, a year old, we could be in a room of people. And as soon as he heard his mother's voice, he would focus on it. Does he understand certain things? Probably. He does have the mental capacity. I think he maxed out at about a 1-year-old. So he doesn't walk, he doesn't talk. In his communication, he'll hug. He's got a high pain threshold, so we don't really know when he's hurting. But it was very interesting when the first time Kim, his mother, put him up in front of the TV to watch the very first race. He was just kind of sitting there, kind of looking at the TV. And then the combination of the announcers with the commotion of the horses moving, but it seemed like every time they said Carson's run, he seemed to focus more and get a little bit more animated. So I'm not going to discount what his mother says. Kim says that he understands who he is. He understands what his name is. He does understand, or we think he understands who his, family is, at least from a hugging standpoint. But any one of you, when you meet him, he'll give you a big old hug if you get too close and put you in a headlock and you can't get out of. So mothers know best. I'm not going to discount his ability to at least understand some basics. But I do believe he knows who his family members are and his name when it's spoken.
On the scale of importance, Wade, this is pretty far down the pecking order, but I'm just curious. I know your friendship with Terry Finley. Have you been an avid follower of horse racing, or are you now just really getting an introduction into this particular world?
I'm just now getting an introduction. I will say that I've followed Terry since the beginning of West Point Thoroughbreds when he first got involved and he left the military. Mainly in the beginning because he made a point to make sure that we were okay. He would ask every time I saw him, how's Carson? And a lot of our friends were very apprehensive in the beginning because he wasn't supposed to be with us. So every time, especially in the military, you see everybody maybe once a year, Army-Navy game, football game, or some event, some reunion. But you don't see him that much because you're all over the world. And so when I'd see him, there was just apprehension. Do I ask about Carson? Wonder if he's still alive. Never with Terry. Terry was always, that was the first thing he asked. He'd pull me aside, and we have this emotional aspect. And that's priceless. So I started really following him more closely. And there's another thing that our class does. Terry's part of the board, the Johnny Mack Foundation, helping families that have lost their loved ones in combat make sure they get to school if they want to go to school, college. And so Terry, several years ago, one of the Houston galas, they did Terry and West Point Thoroughbreds put up a fundraiser to have partial ownership in a horse, and people bid on it. And it really got a lot of good, not just publicity, but money for the cause. And so the next year, as our other kids who got scholarships for college in one way or another, and the money we had saved up, Kim and I decided that we were going to give as much that money to the Johnny Mack as we could. It was supposed to be for college education. And our kids earned their own way through college. So the money still should go that. And it's a great cause that, our classmates have done. And so our first delving into horse racing was after the Dallas one 4 years ago, before COVID, where we went ahead and used it to some of that college money to bid on one of those fundraiser items of being a partial owner in a horse. And so we were with Cali Dude when you guys had that. And unfortunately for Cali Dude, his racing career ended short, but it was still exciting to be a part of and starting to understand that. And then as this opportunity came up, again this spring where we got serious about it, I was like, yeah, let's do it again, see what happens.
For those that may not know the whole story, how did yourself and Terry meet? Did you meet at West Point? Did you meet in the Army? And do you have any really good Terry stories that you maybe should or shouldn't tell?
But Terry and I met early in our West Point career in July. We had to report in as new cadets July 1st, 1982. And
Wow.
We met during that first week. And we've been, he's a likable guy. He was hard not to like. So we were friends. And then we were in companies, our second, third, and fourth year at the academy that were closely aligned. And without getting into too much detail, we spent a lot of time walking what we call area tours for doing things we shouldn't have done in the military. So if he wants to expand on that, I'll let him. I will say I spent a lot more time on the area than he did, but we had some good quality time together.
Wade, it's touching to see how emotional you get about this subject, but don't let anybody fool anybody. You got to be a really tough guy. Not only did you go through West Point, but you fought for our country. And there's been, when West Point itself wrote a story about this, they mentioned the fact that there's been some link to people who fought in the Gulf War having children with some sort of disabilities. Are you of the belief that perhaps your time in the military and the Gulf War in particular could have somehow...
Bottom line is we don't know. But yes, the possibility exists. I know it did. It definitely did for some that have been diagnosed. By and large, this chromosomal disorder is overwhelmingly one of the two parents is carrying their chromosomes not the way God had intended, but it just hadn't affected them until they have offspring. That didn't happen with my wife and I. So we don't know. And we were, Carson was doing studies. We were doing studies for 3 years after he was born. And we got to a point where the studies got to be too frequent, the blood that they drew, the tests that they did. And we finally just decided that it was time to move on with life and not put him through any more of that rigor. Nothing was ever conclusive for us. But yes, there's a lot of things. And before I say this, there's nothing I would change in my military career. I'd do it all over again, exactly the same way. You can't predict these things, whether some people say God's will or it just happens. Our situation has proven over time, the fact that we still have him with us and the fact that he's had definitely the positive influence over me, but also I know his mother and our three other kids wouldn't be who they are without that today. So ultimately, yes, there are things that we do in the military, and whether it is some of the preventive drugs that we take, or in our case, my unit was in oil fields for an extended period of time, burning oil fields an extended period of time. But as we hear about burn pits today, and we're finding out more things, Agent Orange with my dad in Vietnam. Before that, constantly the government and the military do the best they can at trying to protect the warfighters. And it's only after the fact do you find out things that may or may not have happened, and you deal with them. In our case, we've been so fortunate with where we are and being in the military and being in having the benefits we have through our medical system and that the military has provided, that we're never going to have to worry about his care. There's a lot of people out there that do, and it's. We know it's difficult for them to deal with us. We haven't had to worry about it. And as long as Carson's alive, he will be on my military benefits. And so we're being taken care of, and life is good.
Yeah, I would just want to say thank you so much for your service. I'm really looking forward to meeting yourself, Wade, and hopefully Carson at Breeders Cup.
Yeah, we got to get him out to one of these races.
Well, we certainly hope that you can make the Breeders' Cup. What a touching story. And it's so neat, not only that you had the horse named after your son, but as Randy mentioned, I mean, what are the odds that this happens twice within a matter of a couple of years with the Cody's Wish story as well? Wade, thank you so much for your time. And I don't know who I'm going to be betting on in the Breeders' Cup Juvenile Turf, but I know who I'm going to be rooting for. Carson's run. How can you not? Wade, thanks so much for your time today, and best of luck
Thank you all.
with both the horse and Carson.
And as this week's Green Group Guest of the Week, Wade Jost will receive a free 1-hour tax consultation. For more information on how you can save money on your taxes, especially if you're involved in this resource business, you can log on to www.greenco.com.
Are you paying too much in taxes? The Green Group can help. There's a reason the most successful owners, breeders, and horsemen select the Green Group as their tax advisors. They save you money and share successful strategies. Over the past 40 years, the Green Group founder, Len Green, has owned and bred some of the best racehorses in the history of the sport, like Eclipse Award-winning champions Jaywalk and Wonder Wheel. His DJ stable competes at the highest level and has received the game's most prestigious honors. Len Green's in-depth, hands-on industry knowledge, combined with cutting-edge tax-saving strategies, has produced positive results for his clientele and has made the Green Group the top-rated accounting and tax firm in the thoroughbred business. For a confidential and complimentary consultation, contact us at 732-634-5100 or visit our website at www.greenco.com. The Green Group, proven strategies to save you taxes.
With some of the fullest fields in the country and quality racing year-round, there's never been a better time to reap the rewards of breeding and racing in Kentucky. Purse money in Kentucky is at an all-time high, as is average purse per race, outpacing California, Florida, and New York. Kentucky breds. Breed them, raise them, race them. We all win.
3 Kentucky breds broke their maidens last week in Europe, including Talentuoso, a son of Omaha Beach, who won on debut at St. Cloud. Blame and Temple City also had winners in France and Ireland. There are 2 more Kentucky breds heading to the Breeders' Cup after this weekend. We already talked to the connections of Carson's Run. Carson's Run won the Grade 1 $500,000 summer stakes to earn a berth into the Breeders' Cup Juvenile Turf. And she feels pretty hit the winner's circle to win the Grade 1 $500,000 Natalma Stakes to earn her way into the Juvenile Fillies Turf. That was Cherie DeVoe's very first Grade 1 winner. Kentucky breds, breed them, raise them, race them all over the world.
Well, this weekend, all eyes will be on Parks, just outside Philadelphia in the town of Bensalem Township, and it's their big day of the year. Huge card, topped by the Grade 1 Cotillion for 3-year-old fillies, $1 million, and of course the Grade 1 Pennsylvania Derby. And as Randy mentioned earlier, Pennsylvania breds will also be in action. There's 2 races for 2-year-old PA-sired PA-bred horses, the Prince Lucky Stakes and the Imply Stakes, both worth $150,000. Also, PA breds will be running in the Plum Pretty and the Alphabet Soup. Guys, always fun to see the Pennsylvania Derby. It's the last big race on the calendar for 3-year-olds coming into the Breeders' Cup. But the race I'm really excited about among the 2 is the Cotillion. It's the better race of the 2 on paper. Pretty Mischievous. Somebody, I don't think she gets quite the credit she deserves. She's won 3 straight Grade 1 races, will be going for her 4th in a row in the Cotillion. I imagine she'll be the favorite in there for Brendan Walsh, but by no means a walkover for her. My pick is going to be the Cowbred, Zoe. How about Ceiling Crusher after a big win in the Torrey Pine Stakes, going wire to wire for Doug O'Neill and Edwin Maldonado? We'll see what happens in the Cotillion. Randy, your thoughts on that one? Then we'll go to the Pennsylvania Derby.
You stole the page right out of my playbook. I think Pretty Mischievous, from a percentage standpoint, is probably the slightly more likely winner. But when you look at what the odds are probably going to be, I would guess Pretty Mischievous will be the favorite. I'd be pretty confident she would be a shorter price than Ceiling Crusher. And with Ceiling Crusher's speed, I think she'll probably control the pace. I think she'll outrun Hoosier Philly to the lead. There's one outside post position local filly, Majestic Creed, who has shown some speed, but I think Ceiling Crusher with inside position on her is probably going to set the pace. And I think it's going to come down to those 2 to the wire, Ceiling Crusher and Pretty Mischievous, in what could be a pretty entertaining race.
I think I'm in agreement with you. Pretty Mischievous. I feel like her better races around 2 turns. She's just a really, really good filly who's won Grade 1 races going 1 turn and 2 turns. I mean, it's not often you see one wins the test going 7-8 and also the Kentucky Oaks. So she's definitely the one to beat. Ceiling Crusher, I mean, she's by Mr. Big out of an Indian Charlie mare. She's won 5 of 6 by a combined over 40 lengths, guys. I mean, she just runs off and hides. I think if they were drawn the other way around, I would actually pick Hoosier Philly on top. It's just a question of who's going to get to the lead. It looks like Hoosier Philly is a need the lead type. I'm going to take that Charlestown Oaks race and just completely toss it in the bin. Sometimes what happens at Charlestown stays at Charlestown. So I actually am going to pick Hoosier Filly on top of all of them, and we'll just see how that works for me. I'm going to bet her as well. I think she's been training really, really well.
One more thing. When you look at Pretty Mischievous Test Stakes win, obviously there's a huge asterisk to that because she was going to be soundly beaten by Maple Leaf Mel. And even if you take Maple Leaf Mel completely out of the equation, it still wasn't one of Pretty Mischievous's better races. I think the reason is because they were trying to keep her closer to Maple Leaf Mel during the early running of the race because she was shortening up a bit. And 44 and change for a half mile being just 4 lengths off that pace, I think that's faster than Pretty Mischievous really wants to run early. I think she was rushed a little bit more than she liked. So I do also, like you said, Zoe, I expect her to be better around 2 turns when she can have a bit of a more reasonable early pace.
And maybe if they just leave her alone, because even in her works, when you watch her in the morning, she's so slow the opening quarter, even going 5/8 and 101, but she finishes like a blast. If they just leave her alone and let her lollygag back there and try not to change her style too much, perhaps that might work as well. She's certainly going to have some pace to run at, that is for sure. It's going to be wickedly fast up front.
Pennsylvania Derby, $1 million for 3-year-olds. The morning line maker has Reincarnate as the 3-1 favorite. Bob Baffert's won this race 4 times. I think they got it wrong. I think Saudi Crown will be the favorite. Those big buyer numbers, Randy, I think it just jump off the page with Saudi Crown. 2 heartbreaking losses by a nose in a row in the Jim Dandy and the Dwyer. 105 and 106 buyer for Brad Cox. I'm going to pick against both those horses, though. I'm going to give Magic Tap a chance in here. Big jump up in class from non-winners of 1 into a grade 1 $1 million race. But Son of Tappet, I think, is on the improve. Is going to need to run faster, but I think he will. My one knock on Saudi Crown is he got a pretty easy trip last time out in the Jim Dandy. Went to the half in 48. As the horse was on the lead. So I don't think he's going to get that kind of trip in this race. I think Gilmore will deserve some attention for Brendan Walsh as well. But how about getting Magic Tap and Steve Asmussen into the winner's circle for Tyler Gaffalione riding? Randy?
Zoe, for the record, Bill and I did not collaborate before we came on the air here on this particular race. I also think Saudi Crown is going to be the favorite. I also think Saudi Crown is the kind of favorite that you have to try to bet against. When you look at his last race, he's obviously got a ton of speed. He showed that the race before in the Dwyer, but he was in a 5-horse field in the Jim Dandy against Forte, Angel of Empire, Hit Show. There was another one in there whose name escapes me right now, who has no speed. So he was going to be in complete control of the early pace, and he was. He had a very easy time of it early. And there are other speed horses in this race that can at least keep him honest and push him a lot more than he was pushed in the Jim Dandy. You've got Scotland. You've got Reincarnate on the outside, who bounced back in a big way when he won the Los Al Derby. In a race, by the way, that I think is better since he was coming off a layoff from the Kentucky Derby than that 91 buyer speed figure would indicate. But given that I got to play against Saudi Crown, Zoe, I think Magic Tap is a very live horse, and I think he'll be, 9-2 maybe?
Yeah, he'll be live for sure. Gaffalione going to ride for Steve Asmussen. I'm more intrigued by Scotland of all of them. I'm going to toss out the Travers. He looked like he absolutely hated the mud that day. He's trained very well. You know, the knock against him could be, he won the Curlin Stakes, the restricted stakes. But it was a very good race for him. It seemed like he came alive on a dry track that day, a 99 buyer speed figure for Scotland. He can come from off the pace. This is a race that's going to be loaded. You got Reincarnate on the outside. They're all going to be gunning. Bob Baffert doesn't take back in grade 1 races. That is for sure. You can bet your bottom dollar on that. But Scotland, one of his best races visually was his actual debut when he broke his maiden and he came from way, way off the pace. He can eat the dirt and he can sit back and wait just a little bit. And that's what I'm hoping they're going to do with him, trying to change things up with Scotland for trainer Bill Mott.
Now, Bill, there's one other race on Saturday that I want to mention on the card that has an interesting corollary storyline.
And that's no doubt, correct?
That's it. That's the Parks Dirt Mile, where Gunite shows up in that race. They could have run Gunite in the next Saturday, a week from Parks, in the Vosburg at 7 furlongs, because Elite Power is apparently skipping that race, and he would be a pretty solid favorite in there. The Ack, a 1-turn mile at Churchill Downs, where Asmussen is primarily stabled. He would have been a solid favorite in there. But instead, they chose to run him in the Parks Dirt Mile around 2 turns. And I texted Steve, and I said, what was the thinking behind pointing for this race instead of the other 2? And he said he thinks this will be a better prep for Gunite. What does that tell you? That tells you that Echo Zulu is almost certainly being pointed for the Breeders' Cup Sprint against the boys, since she is the fastest horse in America right now. And that Gunite, if all goes well with Echo Zulu between now and then, also being owned by Ron Winchell in part, would then be rerouted to maybe run against Cody's Wish again in the Dirt Mile. It's a nice problem to have 2 good horses like that, but that's why I think it's so interesting that Gunite shows up in this 2-turn race at Parks.
Did he say that, or are you reading between the lines?
Well, he told me that. I said, so does this mean that Gunite is being pointed for the Dirt Mile, assuming it all goes well between now and then, and assuming the sprint looks, comparable? And he said that has a lot to do with Echo Zulu.
Great.
Interesting.
Good
Zoe,
scoop.
what's the latest on the women's conference?
Well, it's still going on, and we still have tickets. The women's conference, it's the Women's Summit to be held at Santa Anita the 27th through the 29th. Don't forget, it's opening day at Santa Anita for their fall meet on September the 29th. And we do have a keynote speaker, Reagan Cannon. She is an international leadership speaker and coach. We'll have 3 panels going on, state of the industry, running the show, and looking forward. And some of our panelists include Shannon Arvin from Keeneland, Brittany Urton, Lisa Lazarus, Joy Garner from Naira, Amy Zimmerman, Claudia Sparrow, and Ann Hall from the DMTC. So do get your tickets. You can find them online. It's the Women's Summit, September 27th through the 29th. It'll be a fun day indeed.
And guys, this week the racing industry lost a giant in Brereton Jones at the age of 84. What a rich life he had. Former governor of Kentucky, the founder of Airdrie Stud, and we send our condolences to the Jones family. A big loss for horse racing.
Yeah, and when I was doing I was reading about Governor Jones. We already obviously knew a lot about him from the horse business and his winning 2 Kentucky Oaks and things like that. What I guess I didn't realize until reading the news articles is that when he was governor of Kentucky, to show you the integrity that the guy has, I mean, one of his campaign promises was to clean up government in Kentucky. Apparently, it had been beset by some corruption scandals before he took office, and he did exactly that. That's one of his legacies is to really reinforce ethics in government in the state of Kentucky. And he also put through a new law that previously governors were only allowed to serve 1 term. And that's it. Term limits, 1 term only. And he put in a new law that spearheaded it, that enabled existing governors to run for re-election. And he exempted himself while doing that, which again goes to show you the kind of integrity that he has. And from talking to people in the horse business, he ran Airdrie Stud and he ran his horse pursuits with the same sort of integrity, Zoe, that he showed as governor.
He was a true champion for the equine industry in all shapes and forms. He leaves behind his son, Brett, his wife, Libby, and Lucy, his daughter as well. Just a very classy guy. Ran Airdrie Stud for years. And the one thing that he really did with Airdrie was make their own stallions, including breeding a lot of their mares. If you consider recently what he's done with Collected, breeding, a lot of his really good mares. Believe You Can was bred to Collected. That was one of his first mares. And one of his best mottos that he has is, if you believe you can, you can. And that was Brereton Jones in an absolute nutshell. He was also very instrumental in forming KEEP, which was the Kentucky Equine Education Project. I know several graduates out of that. And he used Keep to actually go forward and help the industry. He was like a key part of getting the historical horse racing machines through all of the hoops they had to jump. And we've seen what that's done to the state of Kentucky as far as purses being doubled. Brereton Jones was a massive force in that. So, I mean, basically just a true champion and a great guy. He certainly was. Do want to remind you that the TDN Writers Room is brought to you by XBTV. Speedboat Beach is our XBTV work of the week. We have not seen him since winning the Cecil B. DeMille Stakes at Santa Anita last fall, and he turned in a bullet 5 furlong work in 59 seconds flat at Santa Anita on Saturday, the best of 23 works on the day. It's his third consecutive 5 furlong work, each one faster than the last. Bob Baffert said he's not picked out his next start. The 3-year-old has won 3 of 4 lifetime starts, including a track record-setting debut performance last September at Del Mar. We'll be right back after this message from XBTV.
All the thrills. Fraction of the bills. Experience the power of the partnership. Change your life, make new friends, and compete at the highest level of thoroughbred racing. West Point Thoroughbreds, the gold standard in racing partnerships. Visit westpointtb.com.
The TDN Writers Room also brought to you by West Point Thoroughbreds. We've already detailed the remarkable, heartwarming story of Carson's run and Carson Jost, owned, of course, by West Point Thoroughbreds and Terry Finley. The details: Carson's run is a $170,000 acquisition by West Point. He was purchased at the OBS April sale. The Summer Stakes win at Woodbine was his first Grade 1 triumph. It was a win-and-you're-in race for the Breeders' Cup Juvenile Turf. And it was the third time West Point has won the Summer Stakes since 2017, and the fourth straight week that West Point has won a graded stakes race. Just like Zoe, West Point is wrapping up its shopping at the September sales at Keeneland. You can go to westpointtb.com and click on the Available Horses tab to see which of their 2023 purchases are still available. And don't forget, because I'm not going to let you forget, joining a West Point partnership can vault you into the world of instant camaraderie. Right, Bill?
Absolutely. West Point will vault you into the winner's circle as well, won't they, Randy? Well, that's a wrap on this week's show. I want to thank my partners, Randy Moss and Zoe Cadman. I want to thank our Green Group guest of the week, Wayne Jost. Also, our editors, Leah LaRocca, Nathan Wilkinson, and our co-producers, Katie Petruniak and Anthony LaRocca. Thanks for joining us this week on the TDN Writers Room. Catch up with you again soon.